there's handouts. You guys.
Here. Just use. You want to use my mic? Okay.
Test 1, 2. Okay, got it. All right, cool. If we're ready to begin, we'll begin with prayer. Lord God, we thank you for the opportunity that we've had this morning to come and talk about a topic that's kind of difficult to talk about, which is mental health and mental illness. Let this be a blessing and a useful tool. And let this be a reminder that our home is in heaven and that this is not the world that we get to live in for eternity. Heaven, there is no illness and no sin. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, thank you guys for coming. This is the signs and symptoms of mental stress and illness, a very general presentation put on by our two counselors in our congregation, and I will let them introduce themselves.
Howdy, folks. Is that too loud?
Yeah, Matthew can turn it down. Matthew, turn it down.
Test. Test. Sounds pretty good? Okay. I am Jason Buck, and do we have the slide that shows my diploma? Yes. Yeah. Okay, so this is for pastor. It's like, where did you get your diploma? What are your credentials? So I'm Jason B. I'm a doctor, a counselor, and a dunker. And I got my degree at Bruce Lee University. So I can't lie in church. I actually went to Ottawa University in 2008 and then at ASU in 2012 with my doctor of behavioral health. And in my private practice, I see a variety of issues, mostly, a lot of times it's someone with a simple issue. They just want to learn how to communicate better with a significant other. They may come in with a simple trauma or a complex trauma that will take a course of treatment to improve, anxiety, depression, and those sorts of things. And so I've been in the business for, if you count when I started as a Stephen minister in 2012, a little over 20 years.
So I'm Jenny Spouty. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So that's what the LCSW stands for. I got my bachelor's at Arizona State University in Family and Human Development in 2013, and then I got my master's in social work in 2017 at ASU. I first started out working mostly in substance abuse and trauma, so I did counseling in those areas for several years. Now I am at a primary care office. My title is behavioral health consultant. So if somebody comes in with depression, anxiety, or stress, then the doctor will ask me to go in and talk with them, and I'll kind of give them interventions, things they can do to help them with those symptoms, and then also give them resources if needed.
What we wanted to get out of this presentation was really just to educate the congregation and anyone who came, because we're doing this again Wednesday, and our hope is that you invite somebody to come and see it. And we're also live streaming both of them, so send them towards our YouTube channel as well. Is that somebody you know more than likely is struggling with mental illness, whether it be anxiety, depression, an unhealthy amount of stress, and if it's a loved one, they don't know how to help, and if you're the one who's struggling, you don't kind of know what steps you can take for help. So our prayer is that this would be a helpful presentation and useful information for you.
And then our hope for this presentation, we just want to provide just basic, as Josh said at the beginning, general mental health information, but also so you can help yourselves and loved ones. We tend to interact with a lot of people in our lives, and a lot of people are dealing with stress and depression and anxiety, especially with the way things are right now in our country, the economy and everything else. So we just want to make sure you have all those resources available to you.
Yeah, we've probably all had a nightmare. And so we thank God when we woke up saying it was just a dream. Relieved we get back to our lives. But imagine someone with a serious mental illness, and though mental illness is a spectrum where you have lesser and greater severity, their nightmare is often a living one. So treatment usually isn't as simple as go check out this program or just take this pill. Some of the best mental health outcomes include a person maintaining recovery with focused effort and a supportive community where they can engage in regular contact. But to help them get there, a hope needs to be instilled that although their life may not be what they thought it should be, it can still be good. And also, as CPR can help someone having a heart attack, there are approaches to help someone experiencing mental stress or substance abuse. And so how can we be more compassionate with ourselves or with others, as Jesus would, if we were going through a mentally stressful time? And hopefully this presentation gives us some ideas how to do that better. As a Christian counselor, I often pray for my clients, whether they're Christians or not, silently, if I know that's going to be offensive to them. And sometimes a scripture like this might come to me if I'm dealing with a person who's what we would say dissociated. You know, they may be half in, half out when they're actually talking about what their issue is. So I may think of a verse like this where it says, Jesus said to the waves, hush, be still. The wind died down, and it became completely calm. So here are some mental health myths and facts, some pretty common ones. Mental health problems affect everyone. The myth, mental health problems don't affect me. The fact, mental health problems are actually very common. In 2020, about 1 in 5 American adults experienced a mental health issue. 1 in 6 young people experienced a major depressive episode. 1 in 20 Americans lived with a serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or major depression. Suicide is the leading cause of death in the United States. In fact, it was the second leading cause of death for people ages 10 to 24. It accounted for the loss of more than 45,979 American lives in 2020, nearly double the number of lives lost to homicide. Myth: children don't experience mental health problems. Fact: even very young children may show early warning signs of mental health concerns. These mental health problems are often clinically diagnosable and can be a product of the interaction of biological, psychological, and social factors. Half of all mental health disorders show first signs before a person turns 14 years old, and 3/4 of mental health disorders begin before age 24. Unfortunately, only half of children and adolescents with diagnosable mental health problems receive the treatment they need. Early mental health support can help a child before problems interfere with other developmental needs. Myth: people with mental health problems are violent and unpredictable. Fact: the vast majority of people with mental health problems are no more likely to be violent than anyone else. Most people with mental illness are not violent, and only 3 to 5% of violent acts can be attributed to individuals living with a serious mental illness. In fact, people with severe mental illnesses are over 10 times more likely to be victims of violent crime than the general population. You probably know someone with a mental health problem and don't even realize it, because many people with mental health problems are highly active and productive members of their communities. Myth: people with mental health needs, even those who are managing their mental illness, cannot tolerate the stress of holding down a job. Fact: people with mental health problems are just as productive as other employees. Employers who hire people with mental health problems report good attendance and punctuality, as well as motivation, good work, and job tenure on par with or greater than other employees. When employees with mental health problems receive effective treatment, it can result in lower total medical costs, increased productivity, lower absenteeism, decreased disability costs. Myth: personality weakness or character flaws cause mental health problems. People with mental health problems can snap out of it if they try hard enough. Fact: mental health problems have nothing to do with being lazy or weak, and many people need to help to get better. Many factors contribute to mental health problems, including biological factors such as genes, physical illness, injury, or brain chemistry, life experiences such as trauma or a history of abuse, family history of mental health problems. People with mental health problems can get better, and many recover completely. Helping individuals with mental health problems. Myth: there's no hope for people with mental health problems. Once a friend or family member develops a mental health problem, he or she will never recover. Fact: studies show that people with mental health problems get better, and many recover completely. Recovery refers to the process in which people are able to live, work, learn, and participate fully in their communities. There are more treatments, services, and community support systems than ever before, and they work. Myth: therapy and self-help are a waste of time. Why bother when you can't just take a pill? Fact: treatment for mental health problems varies depending on the individual and could include medication, therapy, or both. Many individuals work with a support system during the healing and recovery process. Myth: I can't do anything for a person with a mental health problem. Fact: friends and loved ones can make a difference. In 2020, only 20% of adults received any mental health treatment in the past year, which included 10% who received counseling or therapy from a professional. Friends and family can be important influences to help someone get the treatment and services they need by reaching out and letting them know you are available to help, by helping them access mental health services, learning and sharing the facts about mental health, especially if you hear something that isn't true, treating them with respect, just as you would anyone else, and refusing to define them by their diagnosis or using labels such as crazy instead of using first-person language. And last one, myth, prevention doesn't work. It's important to prevent mental illnesses. Fact, prevention of mental, emotional, and behavioral disorders focuses on addressing known risk factors, such as exposure to trauma, that can affect the chances that children, youth, and young adults will develop mental health problems. Promoting the social, emotional well-being of children and young leads to a higher overall productivity, better educational outcomes, lower crime rates, stronger economies, lower healthcare costs, improved quality of life, increased lifespan, and improved family life.
All right, so we're going to go over some of the signs and symptoms of mental health. You can just put this up there. So the first one, lack of motivation or feeling numb or despondent. So a lot of times the dishes will start piling up, laundry starts piling up, you get behind on bills. It's just this no motivation to really do the daily things that you're needing to do. By numbness or despondent, what I mean by that is you're in a room of people, they're all laughing, having a great time, you're there and you don't feel anything. You don't feel those emotions, you don't feel happy, but then also you don't feel hurt or sad or anything like that. You're just numb. Another one is just sleeping. So falling asleep, so you have racing thoughts, it's really hard to get to sleep, or just waking up in the middle of the night not being able to go back to sleep. Isolation, so no desire to socialize. This can be very dangerous, especially with depression, just because the negative thoughts can start to take over, and the isolation becomes really severe. Low energy even after getting rest. You're getting your 8 hours of sleep, you wake up and you just have that low energy, ties into that lack of motivation. So difficulties focusing or concentrating. So you're trying to watch a TV show that you normally really love watching, you can't stay focused. You're reading a book, can't remember what you read. At work, you're trying to do just a simple task like read an email and you can't stay focused on it. So feelings of hopelessness or worthlessness, a big one, a lot of people feel is not good enough. No matter what I do, I'm never going to be good enough for my family, my friends, whatever else. Crying spells or anger outbursts. So a lot of times those emotions we have inside, if we don't have an outlet, a way to let those out, or healthy coping skills, crying tends to be one of our ways of letting out some of those emotions. Same thing with anger outbursts. And this is where something very small can set you off. I always say it's kind of the take out the trash type of situation where you expect your husband to take out the trash, he doesn't, and you just blow up. You get really upset and angry with them. Normally that wouldn't be that situation, but you're at that point where you're extremely angry. So excessive worrying, not able to change those thoughts, intrusive thoughts or memories. So by over excessive worrying, it's a lot of those what if thoughts. You're constantly feeling like something bad is going to happen, not really sure what that is, but you have that constant feeling. Irritability and crankiness. So like we said, you tend to be on edge more just because you're feeling a lot of these other things. So you tend to be really, people will say you're being really cranky or rude or whatever else. Appetite changes. So some people will not have an appetite, so they'll stop eating, tend to lose weight. And then there's other people that food becomes that kind of pleasure circuit. So now it's overeating food. And then substance use or abuse is a big one, especially in our society. If you watch any TV show or movie, they always show the characters where after a long day of work, it's been really stressful, they reach for the wine or the beer or whatever else. So that's very promoted as a coping skill, which in moderation is okay, but it tends to be something we reach for a lot more often when we have a mental health symptom. And then of course, substance abuse is huge in and of itself. We'll talk about it a little bit more later.
Yeah, so Jenny talking about the substance abuse piece. So with any of these specific situations that people find themselves in mentally health-wise, you have depression and mood swings, and some of the common things with all of these disorder are going to be the substance abuse. If that's happening, then that's kind of like a cover of what's happening underneath. So you have to treat the substance abuse first before you can get underneath to the other stuff. So with a depression or a mood swing, you may have a change in routine. Someone you know may have lack of interest in their normal activities. They used to be playing basketball all the time, and now they don't want to have anything to do with basketball. My wife would probably be concerned about that. The existential dread, how do I make sense of all these wars and natural disasters and all the hate that we see in the world around us? Social decline from the norm. So normally they had a social life that was this big, and they're noticing that their social life is getting smaller and smaller. Feeling exhausted. To the point where, in an extreme case, feeling exhausted to the point where I used to literally be able to get out of bed without a problem, and now it takes every bit of energy that I can just to get up and turn on the light. Increased sleeping goes along with that. Feelings of helpless or hopelessness, which Jenny mentioned, and not being able to see a positive future. It's a big one. With the anxiety and panic, you have a lot of what-if thinking. You're thinking about the 1,000 different scenarios that could possibly happen, but chances of them happening are 90% probably not, or probably more than 90% actually. Excessive thinking with no solutions. So you're thinking about a problem and you're trying to get to a solution. The more you think, all you're doing is opening up more potential problems, and that is something with anxiety typically. Physical symptoms, racing.
At that point, is that just in my own life, or like we're looking at the world view? I mean, like what's going on in the whole nation or world? Is it both or one, or is it just my own local?
Yeah, it depends on the animal, it depends on the person. For one person, it might be just what's happening in their life. For another person, it might be they're reading the news like 5 hours a day, but they're not feeling better. It's just creating more worry or something like that. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So those physical symptoms can include a slew of things, Some people with trauma actually can maybe re-experiencing that feeling of where they were traumatized during a time of year when that thing happened, for example. Fear of judgment, fear of death, being perfectionistic. I've got my notes here too. Obsessive compulsive behaviors. So with that, obsessiveness and compulsiveness, they're actually two sides of the coin. Obsessiveness is more of the thinking, the what if, the not being able to let that thinking go. The compulsions is like just being in a repetitive habit, like I have to wash my hands 50 times before I feel like they're clean. And then with trauma, you have that it could be a specific event, like maybe a person had a fairly normal upbringing, and not too much else has happened in their life that was traumatic, but then they got in the car crash that almost killed them. And from a trauma response perspective, if you get those people into counseling sooner rather than later, you're going to see improvements happen a lot more quickly if you can catch a tiger by the tail, so to speak. But if it's a collection of events over time, those trauma histories, if you'd have someone who's experienced abuse from, like, say, a 5-year-old period to a 15-year-old period, you have a 10-year window of things they may remember, things that might be kind of cloudy there. And so having a lot of conversations over time and pinpointing what needs to be treated there is the key. Vivid nightmares, physical discomfort, we talked about that. Exhaustion again, decreased sleeping. Right, with trauma, with the depression, increased sleeping. With the trauma, less sleeping maybe, because you're just sitting there worrying and worrying and worrying, and you're maybe only getting 3 hours of sleep a night if you're lucky. And then that fight or flight, they're constantly living in that fight or flight mode. Like there may be a threat around any corner, so I have to be having my head on a swivel. thought disorders, this falls more into the serious mental illness aspect of mental health, where you have schizophrenic thinking, where you may have, I feel like I have cats that are living in my stomach, and they're just wrestling around all the time, and I just can't seem to get them to calm down. Audio-visual hallucinations, usually that's audio, usually that's audio hallucinations is the typical presentation there. Paranoia, pacing, obsessive-compulsive behaviors. I gotta go on this one too, huh? Okay. With substance abuse, which we talked about, that umbrella, that top piece, if that's not addressed first, it's hard to get to the underlying what's really going on. And so, so the stages of change model there. Okay, so that's probably hard to read from where you're at, but you have 5 basic pieces to that. On the top, you have pre-contemplation. You move into contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance. I just wanted to hit on this quick for you guys, that if a person is in pre-contemplation, what their mindset is, whether it's a substance abuse issue or a mental health issue, their mindset is, I don't have a problem, everybody else around me has a problem. With that sort of a mentality, you cannot reach the person, you cannot get that person help. They're inaccessible, basically. So to continue to push and try to get them help, it's probably going to create more stress. And so when you know that a person is in that phase, you kind of just want to back off and say, I did everything I could. I've given them the resources, I've told them what I can, but they've rejected it. So, but if they're in contemplation, like, wait, I've had enough people come to me now and tell me that I maybe do have a problem. Now I need to start thinking that maybe that is possible. Maybe I do have a problem. Maybe I do need help. You can be helpful in that stage. And then we have the picture here of the mud hole. So in this, I don't know if you can see that too well, but in this case, the person here in the mud hole is the person with the problem. And then all the other people around there are showing the different levels of care that you can provide to that person. The sympathizer standing on the edge of the hole looking down into the person with the problem is saying, oh, wow, that sucks. You have a problem. Can't do much, though. Not much help is happening there. The person who over-identifies as the person who's like, I'm going to go save this person. Let's say they were in that pre-contemplation phase where they are not accepting help or rejecting any kind of help. The over-identifier wants to jump into the hole with that person, and now you have 2 people with a problem instead of 1. The empathizer is the person who, as a Christian person, we have the cross right here, and we hold on to the foot of that cross with one hand, and then we're reaching out with the other hand and saying, hey, come on, here's the help. And so that's the healthy helper there, the empathizer.
All right, so when to get help? Honestly, anytime. So a lot of people go through a lot of suffering before they get to the point of finally asking for help. So really just anytime you feel like something is going on, you're not feeling right, it's always good to ask for that support. So whenever you have a stressful event occur or you think something stressful will be coming, because that way you can learn ways to cope with it, ways to plan ahead, be able to kind of manage that problem. So just when you start to notice you're being negatively affected. So we usually look at functioning for people. How are your symptoms impacting your functioning? Are you showing up late to work, not going to work, calling out of work a lot, not going to family functions, not doing daily hygiene? A lot of people with depression, it's very difficult to have that motivation to get up and even brush your teeth. So some of those things are impacted. So difficulties in relationships, health issues, loneliness, pretty much just if there's anything, like I said before, any type of problem that you're dealing with, you can get help with that. Trauma history is huge. Death of a loved one. And then, of course, if you or a loved one are in crisis, make sure that you call 911 or the crisis line. We're going to talk a lot more in detail later about this.
How to help others, especially when you're meeting with a person who's obviously stressed out on some level. It's normal for us to feel stressed about that too. It's like that, kind of like an unspoken shared concern about what that person's going through. And so it's easy, especially for males, to say, okay, how can I fix this? Okay, they're saying this and this and this now. Okay, try that. Get in that fix-it mode, right? And so it's a good energy. I'm not saying that's a bad energy. It's a good energy to be concerned that someone's going through a hard time. Well, how do we do it, though? How do we use that energy and point it in a direction that's going to be helpful for this person going through an emotional time? So, okay, I'll confess to you, even as a counselor of 20 years now, there'll be certain times I'll be meeting with a person for an hour, and for some reason I just can't quite hear what's going on, what's underneath. So I'll be like, I didn't hear what they just said, but pay attention. Maybe you'll catch the next thing. Okay, I missed that one. Now pay attention. Maybe you'll get the next thing. Eventually, if you let them talk long enough, it'll come back around to what they said. So as long as you're in a place where you can be calm and listen, you'll get that piece or two that you need to maybe help move the dialogue along. So listening to their words, but not just their words, but their nonverbals. Do they look angry, sad, confused? Do you sense that maybe? Could be a feeling more than physical words that they're saying. You might find that, is there anything basic you need? They might need water. Okay. Become interested, don't assume that you know what they're going through, but you could say, hey, you seem sad. Is that true right now? And again, letting them talk without trying to solve anything. At least initially, especially when they're going through that crisis time. And if they're a Christian, if you know that, they've confessed that to you, encourage them that the Lord always loves them no matter what. Pray with them. Simple prayer. Jesus, bless this space with your healing. And again, a reminder, it's okay as a helper to feel anxious or uncertain. And just communicating honestly, I don't even know what to say about that right now. They might share with you something that you've never even heard before, something someone's never gone through. I don't even know what to say about that right now. Wow. You might ask if they have a support system, family, friends, loved ones, church. Who in their life is significant? You can remind them that the feelings don't last forever, like a cloud that's covering the mountain. It's not going to be there forever. I always assess if they feel that physically. Do you feel it in your chest? Is it in your head? Is it just thoughts? Do you get tension in your neck? Whatever. And if you're looking to dig deeper, you can show some interest in the details. If someone is sad because of the loss of a girlfriend or boyfriend, you might say, what about that breakup bothers you the most? Just be yourself. Let them know they have value. You know they have value. Ask them what they're thankful for.
All right, so we're just going to go over some basic coping skills. There's a lot of coping skills, so these definitely don't cover all of them, but just so we can kind of review a little bit. And there's more in the handouts that you were provided as well. So of course, prayer, reading the Bible, talking with pastor, your faith is a huge coping skill. So distracting yourself or staying busy, so especially if you have those more anxiety, worrying thoughts, intrusive thoughts, distraction can be a good way of working through those, trying not to let that consume you. Engaging in pleasurable activities, so doing the things that you enjoy. You may not have a lot of interest in doing it. You may have to force yourself. It is what it is. That's kind of what's going to get you out of that hole. Diet and exercise, adding healthy options. We know very much so that physical health and mental health are directly linked. So really trying to get out, go for a walk, trying to stay on a healthy diet, don't eat junk food. Yeah.
80-20.
And emotional release. So kind of like I said before, crying is an emotional release. So that is a healthy way of letting out some of those emotions. But there can be running, there can be people do like going to the batting cages, things like that, just to release some of those emotions. And the 5-minute rule helps with motivation. So it kind of is a way to trick our brain when we don't want to do something. If you can try and get yourself to do it for 5 minutes, usually we push past that not wanting to do it and we want to continue doing it. So do 5 minutes of the dishes and then just see where you're at after that. Do a 5-minute walk. Go talk with somebody for 5 minutes because it kind of tricks you into actually doing something, forcing yourself to do something. Redirecting our what if thoughts to what is. So this is a big one with anxiety, but other things too, stress. We have a lot of those what if something bad happens. We have a lot of kind of crazy what ifs that are never actually going to happen floating around in our head, trying to get ourselves back to what is actually going on right now. What can I control and what can I change? So if we can try and get rid of kind of those what ifs and focus on the here and now, it can help us feel less anxious. An example, especially working in primary care during COVID, a big one was anxiety over COVID. People were losing loved ones, all of that, they were very anxious. And so we talked a lot about, hey, we can't change the fact that COVID exists. It does. It's here, that's what it is. I can't change that, I can't make it stop. But what can I do? What can I change in my daily life where I feel I'm in control? And then, of course, fidget toys. So we have the fidget spinner here. You guys have seen those. So that's a big one. There's little cubes. You can buy them on Amazon for super cheap, but they're so helpful. If you're more of an anxious person or stressed out at work, having something quiet where you can play with your hands.
The original fidget toy was the pen, right? The click, 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 click.
I was curious, back on the prayer and reading the Bible, do you guys have a list of recommended scripture references to start at, for instance, like that could be shared?
So, I
Sure.
would talk with Pastor. That's the big one. He has a lot of resources for that. And then I think you have later some books.
Yeah,
things like that.
there are some book recommendations, and I personally have some favorites on that. Psalm 91 is a big one. But yeah, quite a few of those. Okay. All right. So, thought challenging. This is a cognitive therapy technique, So this is helping us to find out what's at the bottom of what's bothersome. So, let's say I get. Sometimes we call this the difference between the explicit and the implicit contract. So, the explicit contract might be you're talking to a person and they say, "I don't want to live anymore." And then when you talk to them a little bit more and you get down into the bottom of what's really bothering them, you find out, I just found out that my mom has cancer. That's the implicit deal that's going on there. Albert Ellis did the REBT, and that's a form of therapy of challenging irrational beliefs. So let's say we're going home today, we're driving down the road, and someone just cuts us off in traffic, and immediately we get an angry response. And we want to be vigilantes and have justice be done. Speed it up a little bit here. Let's show them a lesson. What's really behind that anger there? They did it to me intentionally. It was on purpose. They're out to get me. That might be the irrational belief. Cognitive therapy would challenge that and say, well, watch the car going up the road a little farther, and did they cut somebody else off, or a third person, or a fourth person? Then obviously it wasn't coming at you personally. This was just the way they drive. that sometimes might not take that anger all the way down, but it'll take the anger maybe from here to like here, which in therapy we call that progress. We have less of what's bad. It's not perfect. There are mindfulness and meditation and visualization tools. Is this where we practice that's later? Okay. Increasing healthy social networks, family, friends, faith, sports. You know, you hear about the shooters that go into these schools and they take people out mindlessly. What's one of the common things about them all? Their world is just this small. They have no social connections with people that they trust. You know, they've just gone totally animal with that. Maybe beyond the help of the mental health community, possibly on those when it gets that bad. Let's see, handouts.
Those are just the handouts everybody has.
Okay. Okay. So you don't have to do this, but if people want to try a couple of different breathing techniques, we have those. I was just going to demonstrate those. One is called the box breathing technique. So what you do with a box breathing technique is you breathe in for a count of about 2, hold it for 2, breathe it out 2, and then hold it at the bottom for 2. And then you just repeat 5 or 6 times. A lot of times if you're in a stressful situation where it's like, I have to act, like the guy that cuts you off in traffic and the anger is there, just a simple breathing technique like that with doing it for 1 minute can totally change your outlook.
And to add to that, make sure you're breathing with your belly. A lot of us breathe with our chest. We want to make sure we get a good, big belly breath when we're doing that. Also, you can trace a square. So if you're at work and you've got a computer screen right in front of you, you can use the computer screen as a guide for the box breathing.
And then there's another handout that has the relaxation response, which was written by Herbert Benson, studied Western medicine versus Eastern medicine and took some of those Eastern approaches and integrated it into the Western model. And going along like that 1 Thessalonians 5:17, pray continuously aspect, you know, you can breathe in and say something like, Jesus on the in-breath and have mercy on the out-breath. And then just repeat for a couple of minutes. Yeah. Okay, this is where things get as bad as they can be, you know, the self-harm and suicide signs. May include, and that's a big maybe, I mean, they don't always include this, helpless and hopelessness because it's not always communicated, so that's one. And then you have, there may be some self-harming going on there with cuts or burns, you might notice that on them. They might have had a previous self-harm or suicide attempt. They might have a plan to self-harm. They might have access to lethal means of self-harm like narcotics or firearms. And they might be engaging in extreme or promiscuous behaviors, isolation. Dramatic mood shifts. I thought this person was like this. Now they're like this. What created that huge shift in their personality? And a withdrawal from friends and family.
Yeah, and another one too I wanted to add, something we look for in counseling if somebody has been really depressed and we're working with them and all of a sudden they come in extremely happy. That's odd. That's not normal. That's not their normal composition. Usually that means they've made a plan. They have a plan to get an out. So now they're happy. They have this in place. And so that's a scary thing too. So with the mood shifts, if you notice that as well.
And there's a huge relief there, what Jenny's talking about there, because they now know that the pain is going to be over because a week from now I plan to shoot myself and all this will be gone.
So here's just some emergency and hotline resources. I know we're running out of time, so just go ahead and throw them all on the screen. They're all in your resource packets. We just want to give you pretty much everything that's available because who knows what you're dealing with friends and family and people in your life, coworkers. There's also, go back real quick. So there is a postpartum support one. There's one for child abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence. Banner Behavioral Health up there, they do intensive outpatient mental health groups. So it's 5 days a week. You go, you learn really good coping skills. And they also do inpatient.
So these are the folks, if say you end up having a conversation with someone like this and you want to get them help, these are the folks that you want to kind of keep an eye out for. So if you go onto like a place like Psychology Today, you would look for people with those credentials. That means that they are licensed at an independent level. And that means that they've gone through all the training, the internships, the clinical supervision that was required to get them to that level. So those are LCSWs, LPCs, LMFTs, and LISACs. LCSW, licensed clinical social worker at the independent level, licensed professional counselor. That's Jenny and me. Licensed marriage and family therapist, and licensed substance abuse counselor. And so then that tells you what the counselors specialize in. If you go to Psychology Today and type in your zip code, people that are in your area will pop up. And then you can look at are they a Christian person? You know, how do they practice? A lot of them will have a list of things that they specialize in. Medical doctors, including your primary care physicians, naturopathic doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists. These are folks that if there's a chemistry problem in the brain, they can help prescribe either natural type of prescriptions or pharmacy stuff. And then peer support groups can be extremely helpful for folks, for Alcoholic Anonymous, Narcotic Anonymous, Smart Recovery groups, which incorporate a lot of the traditional 12-step AA model, but they're a little bit of a, do you know much about Smart Recovery, Jenny? I mean, they're a little...
Yeah, they're more curriculum-based. They don't do faith.
Yeah.
So a lot
That's
of the
better.
AA entities can celebrate recovery, especially use faith, but Smart Recovery is for those that don't want to have faith involved.
Yeah. And those are peer-run groups. And then you also have trained church volunteers, which include Wells Resources, Stephen Ministry. That's where I got my start into this business. Peace with God online ministry. That's run by the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, where people can write emails or have a chat coach and that kind of stuff, and they can teach people about Jesus. And then church volunteers with Bible-based listening tools. That goes along with that, yeah. Equine therapy, spending time with animals, retreats, hiking, camping, a lot of intensive inpatient programs will include some of that stuff where you go out and get reacclimated with the world around them.
Quick question. Some of the Wells resources, are they geared towards teens versus just adults?
I think there's a few that are geared towards teens, but it's a combination of adults and teens.
Okay.
So. Yeah, that is our next slide. Just resources. Since we are running out of time, I just want to highlight MAP counseling through Wisconsin Lutheran Child Family Services is what we offer here at church. So you would have to meet with pastor to get the what's the word? Access code, and then you would get to meet with a therapist, and that's church provides for that. So that's no cost to you. If you have any questions about it, talk to pastor. That's above my pay grade. And then more resources.
These are more counseling-based, grief support groups, suicide support groups, those types of things.
And again, you can get all this if you put your email down. We'll email the
And
presentation
it's
if
also
you're
in those
interested in
resources
it.
as well.
And it's
So,
on the handout. So.
Yeah.
any questions that anybody has?
Yeah. Thank you for attending.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah, Gary. Oh, wait. We have a question.
Not yet.
We have a question.
Mine's not a question.
Oh.
Yes, thank you, both of you, for what you do. It's very important, and God's given you that talent to do so. One comment here. When I was growing up, we always heard the phrase, "Sticks and stones will break your bones, but words may never hurt me." So wrong. Words mean everything. It's our job to make sure that we encourage people, that we speak good things, positive things. We talk about it. It's so important. Because there are people that have gone through life and they don't know why they're angry or they're sad. But it may be because somebody said something when they were real little.
Sure.
And it created an emotional scar. Well, that emotional scar now causes physical
Sure.
things that now have to be addressed. Another comment. Our world today is so text-based driven.
Sure.
Take the time to pay attention to what people are saying. I can't tell you how many times, just in the last month, that somebody was saying something, and I took the time and said, "You're so valuable. You're worth it."
Awesome.
And it meant the world to them. Take the time. And like you also said, the things that people that may be suicidal. I had a coworker. She didn't know that she was going through depression. Her world was collapsing very quickly. I read the text and I immediately called her. And she
Good.
said, "I did not
Yeah.
realize what was happening." She went and got the help that she needed. But it was, thank goodness, that I was able to catch something that was happening. She didn't know it.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Yeah.
So
Amen.
just take the time, pay attention, guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you all for attending. Yeah,
One
Pastor.
last
Yeah.
thing. If I have a father-in-law that's completely local and needs to be committed, how do I go about getting that done?
We'll talk to you after the meeting.
Now you know why I have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you very much
Yeah.
for it. Very,
Thank
very
you.
well done, and appreciate all the information.
You bet.
Look at some of those things there and going, hey, some of that's me too, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I was when I was reading my abnormal psychology textbook. I'm like, I'm all of this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Nice looking.
And again, this is going to be